Oh, hey there. John Michael reading this book, Healing the Child Within. Chapter 12. Continuing to grieve, risking, sharing, and telling our story. Risking. When we risk, we expose ourselves, our child within, our true self. We take a chance and we become vulnerable. When we do this, two extremes outcomes may emerge: acceptance or rejection. The whatever we may decide to risk about ourselves, another may accept, reject, or may react somewhere in between. Many of us may have been so wounded from risking, whether in our childhood, adolescence, adulthood, or all three, that we are usually reluctant or unable to risk and share our real self with others. Yet we are caught in a dilemma. When we hold in our feelings, thoughts, concerns, and creativities, our child within becomes stifled, and we feel bad. We hurt. Our held in energy may become stifled, and we feel bad, hurt. Our held in energy may build up so much that only we can handle it. And our held in energy may build up so much that the only way we can handle it is to let it out to someone. This is the predicament that many of us who grew up in troubled families encounter. And because of a number of factors, such as our seeking approval, validation, excitement, and intimacy, we may select someone who is not safe and supportive. Indeed, they may reject us or betray us in some way, which may just confirm our reluctance to risk. So we hold in all our feelings. Again, the cycle continues. Yet, to heal our child within, we have to share with others. So where do we start? Rather than hold it in and let it out impulsively or haphazardly, we can begin to take steps one at a time. Find someone who we know is safe and supportive, such as a trusted friend, a counselor, or a therapist group, or sponsor. Begin by risking one little thing. Follow the share, check, share guideline described above. If it works, share some more. Risking and sharing involves several other core issues, including trust, control, feeling, fear of abandonment, all or none thinking and behaving, and high tolerance for inappropriate behavior. When any of these issues come up, it can be useful to consider and even begin talking about it with safe people. As we risk, we can eventually begin to tell our story. Telling our story. Telling our story is a powerful act in discovering and healing our child within. It is a foundation of recovery in self-help groups, group therapy, and individual psychotherapy and counseling. I describe some of the dynamics of storytelling in Alcoholism and Spirituality, another book. Each of our stories, when complete, contains three basic parts: separation, initiation, and return. This is The Hero's Journey by Campbell. What's his first name? 12-step help groups describe their stories as what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now. People in group therapy may call it risking, sharing, participating, and working in the group. In individual counseling or psychotherapy, we may describe it by similar names, and psychoanalysts may call it free association, working through transference and through unsolved internal conflict. Among close friends, we call it baring our souls or having a heart-to-heart. In sharing and telling our story, we can be aware that gossip and wallowing in our pain are usually counterproductive to healing. This is in part because gossip tend to be attacking rather than self-disclosing, and it is generally incomplete following the victim stance or cycle. Wallowing in our pain is continuing to express our suffering beyond a reasonable duration for healthy grieving. There is a danger here that may be observed in some self-help meetings. When a person tries to tell a painful story that has no apparent or immediate resolution, the other members may unknowingly label it as self-pity or a pity party. In this case, while self-help meetings are generally safe and supportive, the bereaved may wish to look elsewhere to express their pain. Simos, an author, said, grief work must be shared. In sharing, however, there must be no impatience, censure, or boredom with repetition, because repetition is necessary for catharsis and internalization and eventual unconscious acceptance of the reality of the loss. The bereaved are sensitive to the feelings of others and will not only refrain from revealing feelings to those they consider unequal to the burden of sharing the grief, but may even try to convert the helpers, i.e. the listeners. Our story does not have to be a classical drunkalogue or long in length. In telling our story, we can talk about what is important, meaningful, confusing, conflicting, or painful in our life. We risk, share, interact, discover, and more. And by so doing, we heal ourselves. While we can listen to the stories of others, and they can listen to ours, perhaps the most healing feature is that we, the storyteller, get to hear our own story. While we may have an idea about what our story is, whenever we tell it, it usually comes out different from what we initially thought. I have illustrated our story in Figure 2, starting at the point on the circle called contentment. We can forget that we are in our story. Eventually, in our day-to-day life, we experience a loss, whether it's real or threatened loss. The stage is now set for both grieving and growing. In Figure 2, I have summarized most of the initial pain of our grieving as hurt, and we feel hurt, and we tend to get angry. When we feel hurt, we tend to get angry. There's no Figure 2 here on this page. I'll let you know when I get there. As at the crucial point where we have a possibility of becoming aware and we have experienced a loss or a suffering, an upset, and we can choose to make a commitment to facing our suffering and grieving head on. We can call this cycle of our story completed. We can call this cycle of our story completed, one or the heroine's journey. We may remain unaware of the possibility of working through our suffering around our loss or upset. We may then begin to build up a resentment and or blame ourselves, which eventually leads to stress-related illness and to more prolonged suffering than if we had worked through our upset and our grieving in the first place. We can call this cycle the victim cycle or the martyr-victim stance. If we commit to work through our pain and grieving, we then begin to share, ventilate, participate, and to experience our suffering. we may need to tell our story in such a fashion several times. Here's the figure 2. Unity. Right, so the hero's journey is just going from good feelings, neutral feelings, down to bad feelings. But you have to come up again. And when you come up again, you get back to good feelings, but you get back to good feelings with better, greater context of who you are. Periodically, over a period of several hours, days, weeks, and even months, in order to finally complete our story, we may also have to consider it in other ways, mull it over, dream about it, and even tell it again. I dreamed of a song last night. And I don't remember it, but I recorded it. While this has been painful for us, we now complete our upset or conflict. We are free of its pain. Our conflict is now resolved and integrated. We have learned from it. We have healed our child within and have grown, and we can settle back to our neutral state of our child within, which is contentment, joy, and creativity. However, to begin to tell our story may be difficult, and when we tell it, it may be difficult to express our feelings around it. And among our most difficult feelings to recognize and to express it is anger. Anger is a major component in grieving and in healing our child within. Getting angry. Anger is one of the most common and most important of our feelings. Like other feelings, it is an indicator to us of what we might need to attend to. People who grew up in troubled families often do not realize how angry they are, nor how useful it can be for them to recognize and express their anger, even if their trauma or mistreatment happened many years ago. When they were children and adolescents, they were often repeatedly mistreated. This mistreatment may be subtle. As discussed above in Chapter 9, under high tolerance for inappropriate behavior, children and adults often do not realize that they have been mistreated. Having no other reference point from which to test reality, they think that how they were treated and often how they still are being treated is somehow appropriate or okay. Or if not appropriate, that they somehow deserve to be mistreated. Through hearing the stories of others in recovery, we slowly learn that what mistreatment, abuse, or neglect actually is. In recovery, in group therapy, or individual therapy, becoming and being aware of our feelings and expressing them is shown to be a distinct advantage in eventually living a successful and peaceful life. As we discover our mistreatment, we can begin the necessary and freeing process of grieving and mourning, becoming aware of our anger and expressing it as a major part of the grieving process. One of the few deficiencies of some of the 12-step self-help groups is their hidden fear of feelings and emotion, especially painful ones. There is a saying, HALT, H-A-L-T. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Hungry, H. Angry, A. L. Lonely, T. Tired. The newly recovering person can just as easily take this to mean hold on to your feelings. As to its more accurate meaning, take better care of yourself so that you can help prevent being overwhelmed by these feelings. That's kind of interesting. Many people in recovery are afraid to express their anger. They are often fearful that they might lose control if they really get angry. They might hurt someone, hurt themselves, or someone else bad. Something else bad might happen. Were they to pursue it, they would often discover that their anger Were they to pursue it, they would often discover that their anger is not a superficial upset, but it is actually rage. And to be enraged is scary. It is normal to be scared over becoming aware of and fully expressing our anger. Often accompanying being angry, there may be a somatic or nervous symptom, such as trembling, shaking, panic, loss of appetite, and even feeling of excitement. It can be freeing to get in touch with and express our anger, yet in a troubled family or environment, the healthy awareness and expression of feeling is discouraged and may even be forbidden. As a child, adolescent, or adult, we experience a loss or a trauma, whether real or threatened, and from that experience respond most basically with fear and hurt. However, in an environment where feelings can be expressed, we feel as though we caused a loss or trauma. We feel shame and guilt, but neither of these can be openly expressed, so we may then feel even more angry. And if we try to express that, we are squelched again. With repeated stuffing or repressing of such feelings, our child within is left feeling confused, sad, shameful, and empty. As these painful feelings build and accumulate, they begin to become intolerable, with repeatedly nowhere to ventilate them. Our only choice seems to be to block them all out as best we can, i.e. to become numb. We actually have 4 additional choices which we may learn as we grow older. 1, to hold it in until it gets unbearable. 2, unable to let it out, we get physically, emotionally sick, and we blow up. 3, to bolt the pain out with alcohol, to blot the pain out with alcohol or other drugs. Or 4, to express our pain and work through it with safe and supportive people. Bottling the pain, blotting out the pain with alcohol or other drugs, whether prescribed or by a physician or self-administered, is generally not effective for a long and may be dangerous, in part for a child of an alcoholic parent or grandparent, because the tendency of alcoholism and other chemical dependencies is to be familial or possibly inherited in such families. Doing so also blocks or delays healthy grief resolution. A problem is that many of us have reached out for help with our pain, and we have been given drugs to lessen the pain, rather than to be counseled that we are in the process of grieving and encouraged to work through it. Well, holding the pain in until it gets so unbearable that we blow up is an outlet that is often modeled in troubled families. While doing so is probably more effective than drinking or using drugs to handle it, or than becoming numb, it is not nearly so effective as ventilating the pain when it happens or comes up with a person who is safe and supportive. Face your fears as you feel them. And we're going to end there. That is, got a couple of pages left here in this chapter, but 20 minutes and that ding dong. Good. Goodbye. Have a good weekend or a good weekday. Have a good evening, afternoon, or morning. It all depends on when you are.